And now, it's time for the Lakeside Drive F1 podcast. Here are your hosts and my supreme leaders, James Baldwin, Campy, and Freya Brolsma.
Expectations are met for the 23rd race of the 2023 season. Sorry, the first race of the 2024 season where Max Verstappen wins. What an absolute surprise to literally none of us. But is the Red Bull as dominant as we were expecting? Yes, especially if your teammate is Sergio Perez because he finished 22.4 seconds behind Max Verstappen. But of course, there's plenty to talk about in Bahrain, up and down the grid. And to do that, I am joined by my friends and yours, Freya Brolsma. Hello, mate.
G'day, how are we?
Yes, very tired. Thank you for asking. And Thomas J. Camp, who also was awake at the ungodly hour of 2 o'clock in the morning.
Yes, I'm well, mate. I'm well, Freya. How are you?
Yep, very good. Thank you.
Good.
I was not up at 2 o'clock in the morning.
No, you weren't.
But it was. Well, we won't turn this to a running chat yet.
Oh,
but I was
not
up
even a minute
early
in.
For different reasons. Yeah, exactly.
How far did you run this morning?
17 miles.
Can you use the unit of measurement that everyone understands?
That will be around about 27 Ks. 27.3, I reckon.
That's 28 kilometres too far, to be very honest. Just very quickly, if you are a good human being and you want to support a really good cause, Freya is running the London Marathon. She's doing this clearly under duress by someone. There's someone out of frame holding a gun or something. Because why would you do this on purpose? Maddie J, why would you do this on purpose? Let me know in the Discord. But seriously, really, really good to get behind. Link is in the show description if you want to support Freya. We'll put it as many places as we can. Freya, how long away is the marathon?
7 weeks. So it is. We're starting to get those last couple of really long pieces in. So yeah, I can't wait. The vibe's going to be
I don't care
amazing.
anymore. Don't want to talk about running anymore. That's boring. Let's talk about Bahrain. There's plenty to go through.
Running could be more exciting than some of the races coming up if today had anything
absolutely not.
Go.
No, couldn't. Even the most, but Monaco is still more important and more interesting than running. Plenty to get through. Our team-by-team analysis. We'll talk about the national anthem, the flyover, Discord comments of the week, and F1 fantasy. Coming up in this episode of the Lakeside Drive F1 podcast. TJC. A couple of things. Firstly, I'm going to start with an apology. I've watched the episode on Alpine with Drive to Survive and firmly landed in the Bruno is an absolute piece of work. So remove any kind of things that I had for him. I am just removing Alpine, everyone from Alpine, from any kind of good points system in my book. What an absolute useless organisation. Hey, Bruno, it's going so well for you so far, hey? Aren't your upgrades going well? Your head of aeros quit, your head of designs just quit, and you're right at the very back of the pack, save for some issues with 2 other cars. How's Alpine going? Otmar must be just absolutely bloody loving himself, Campy.
Well, there you go. Got that one right. Off to a good start this year. 1 from 1. Don't know about my podium predictions, but
no.
Yeah. Look, it's a shame to see, isn't it? But that's what happens when you don't get your off-track organisational structures right. There's no way you can improve with the discontinuity that team's had in the last 5 years, really, since Cyril Beeple left. So Cyril's looking like a pretty good job. Look, he's doing a pretty good job. So it's unfortunate, but a French team, 2 French drivers. Did we really expect anything less than what's happened? So
I can't help it.
And I'm here for it.
You can't help it.
Where does that leave Ocon and
take that grin off your
Gasly's
face, Campy. You're loving this.
Where does that leave Ocon and Gasly's status for a drive next year? We got nine drivers, almost every team except for Ferrari with the driver out of contract. What do their stocks look like? Do they get drives next year on the back of a poor performance and a poor car? I think reputationally Gasly's probably a bit better than Ocon, but I'm not sure that there'd be another team out there looking to pick them up when there's possibly some other drivers coming through.
Are you still in the butler's pantry, by the way?
No, I'm not.
Okay, sorry, I forgot to ask.
Polishing the silver, are we, Campy, while you throw it at the French?
Butler's in residence today, so I had to leave his space.
My butler's name was Carl, by the way.
Carl.
It's another apology because you said you didn't have one and you didn't grow up with a silver spoon in your mouth last week. So that was interesting. I want to talk about the national anthem. Campy, we had a full marching band set up. Your musical professional thoughts?
The Bahrain Police Band. I was actually quite impressed. Not the greatest anthem we've ever seen. Certainly not the worst anthem we've ever seen. Good start to the year. I'm excited for all the anthems coming our way this year. Big note on the US anthem's always the greatest. It's the greatest anthem in the world. The Italian anthem, when it breaks down, it goes da-da-da, da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da-da. That's they're probably the two best parts of the year that I'm looking forward to, if I'm really honest. So, great start.
To steal a line from friends of the podcast Box of Neutrals, clearly this is just a preview of the 2025 season where Lewis Hamilton goes to Ferrari. Freya, just before we started recording, I heard you talk about, in a positive way or not, about the flyover. What were your thoughts of the Gulf Air 787?
It was there.
Yes.
That's about it. I think if they are going to use biofuel or whatever it was, that means that they can put more planes up there and give us something really spectacular to kick off the season. I understand that they're thinking about their carbon footprint and all of those things. I think we all understand how much of a value that truly is to the nature of this sport. So I think when we see things like that, it's a bit tongue-in-cheek, to be entirely honest, when they start putting sustainability at the forefront of the spectacle, because it doesn't seem to apply to so much of what else they do. So the start of the season, Campy and I were just saying that we wanted something to get us really excited, and an epic flyover would have been just the thing. So, yes.
By all accounts, it looked like it had a couple of passes, not just one flyover, which is normally what happens at Abu Dhabi. They just do one and then it bugs off. So at least it came back for another crack.
But then you just feel like you're sitting under an airport. Like, it's not as though you've got the red arrows, whatever they are, kind of doing something amazing or some acrobatics or something like that. It feels like I'm literally sitting by the airport, which, by the way, we've got one. It's about 3 kilometres that way. So I can go and look at a big plane whenever I want. It's
okay,
something
don't rub
a bit
it in.
exciting would have been great.
We don't all live near an airport anymore. Look, it's you're right. I think the good thing is at least there was one, right? Because we saw plenty of instances last year where it didn't occur. As many people know, I'm a bit of an av geek, so I was a big fan to see just something in the air. Surely it can get better from here. Let's go to our Discord comments of the week. Freya, shall we start with you?
Sure. Mine goes to Beefcake Mega, which was, it really hammers home how Andretti wouldn't fit in, what with all this competitiveness in the old Joey Tribbiani quote marks. Obviously, in reference to the 52-second pit stop, which we were seeing going on, and some of the fairly dismal performances towards the back of the grid this weekend.
Yes, it's just good. It's just really good content. If you're not joined our Discord, do that because the link is in the description. A whole bunch of you joined recently. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. Campy, what was your pick?
Well, I've gone for Ross 2 weeks in a row now.
I've also gone for Ross.
No one likes to show off Ross.
Just settle down.
This was a reply to your comment, James, about Crofty being just absolutely onto it and professional and awesome for the first round of Formula One. He said, I'm surprised he didn't suggest Donald Glover is related to Donald Glover, of all people.
Are you sure that's what the quote was?
Yeah.
Not sure that's right.
I don't think that's right.
I
Anyway.
found that 2 minutes ago.
No, I don't think you quoted that correctly. Well, mine was also Ross, and I can quote this directly. Newey is probably thinking he can shave a few tenths off the Austrian anthem.
Yeah, that was great.
There's only two anthems that we don't need to hear more than once this year, and that is the Austrian and the Dutch national anthem. Well, in person, I should say, because we'll hear it literally everywhere else. Are you happy with that? Was
it
the
is
quote?
Definitely
Campy?
The quote.
Your
I'm
journalistic
surprised he
skills
didn't
intact?
suggest Donald Glover is related to
Integrity intact.
Donald Glover. It was about Ted, not Crofty, sorry, because Ted was also off to a cracking start this week.
Okay. Ted? Let's. We no longer do Tommy T's television broadcast review because many of you who are listening have no idea who that is. And unlike other shows, Australian F1 shows, we don't keep the dead alive on the podcast. When it comes to the broadcast, though, I do want to mention a couple of things. Firstly, Ted was just in absolute fine form in his notebook. I was writing up the F1 briefing whilst listening to him and had to turn him off because I was getting distracted by random things that he was saying that just had absolutely nothing to do with the race. So he was in fine form. And it didn't take long, and I haven't really heard Brundle do this for a very long time. It didn't take long for Brundle to accost the turbocharged V6 that we've got now, we've had since 2014. He's like, it's 10 years and it's the worst thing that ever happened to this sport and it's too heavy and, we're stuck with it now. And I was like, Brundle, where have you been? The last time I really heard you talk about this was like 15, 16. Anyway, the broadcast was all over it, Freya.
I do have one penalty, though, for Brundle, which was a real throwback, which just was not relevant to what was happening on track either, which was when he started going, I remember overtaking Niki Lauda once. I was like,
grasping at straws to relevance.
Oh, come on.
Campy, you were on the grid early as well for the grid walk, and you had something interesting to say to Brundle.
Oh, yeah, I support Adrian Newey. That's the way I go. Me and Jeremy Clarkson. Jeez, it was good to have him around. What a fun-loving character that guy is. He just brings a joy to the rest of the...
Agree to disagree.
Well, he might not be your cup of tea, but his vibe and energy that he brings is very different to the, the subdued, relaxed, try to be professional people that were on the...
I suppose it's just the idea that racist misogynists aren't my cup of tea. You're not wrong, Campy.
Yeah, but he comes from that generation. You got to let people be themselves. And if that's what he was of yesteryear, 20 years ago, and he hasn't grown out of it, you might not agree with it.
You mean the article that he wrote about a year ago? I'm sorry.
I'm not
we will continue.
Everyone's turned off now. Everyone stopped listening to the podcast. Why are we going here? My point is... Clarkson is Campy. Anyway, he also waved the flag, which he did late, by the way. Everyone had to shout at him at the box because he didn't want to do it too early. There's a very good video of him on his social media freaking out a little bit about doing that. All right, Freya, you hosted last week, so I think this is a good opportunity to throw back to last week to prove just how incredibly wrong we are about Formula One still with our predictions.
Well, to be fair, you and I, James, did at least get our third place predictions correct. Mm-hmm. And I did say that Leclerc would have something go wrong with his car. I thought it would be more significant than it was, something along the lines of an engine failure. But as it was, he did have significant issues. So I feel like that did kind of play out. But Campy, your podium was Max, Ricciardo and Piastri. How's that going for you, mate?
People want some entertainment. They don't want to hear the same old bland. Let's get this right. We've got a fantasy league for that, which I totally forgot about. So I'm already out of this year's competition. So
from here on in, Campy's predictions will just be his fantasy league and will live up to its name. You also had Sargent in last, and then your bold prediction was Hamilton turn one to crash. So you're going to have to make a step up if you want to hold on to your self-proclaimed title of being the F1 prophet.
Right?
Well, Sargent was correct.
Sargent right.
You got Mac. You got front and back. You got the front and the back. Everything else in the middle is inconsequential. Welcome to the sandwich, Campy sandwich. It's what you do with it. Interesting, Freya. That you said Tsunoda. Or did you say no? That was me. I said that Ricciardo and Tsunoda outside the podium positions. They were not just very, very outside the podium positions, fighting like children. So I can't help it. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But look, I think now we have a bit more of an opportunity to see where everyone lies ahead of Saudi Arabia, which is only this week. It's only next Saturday at, I think, a worse time. I don't know if there was a worse time than 2 o'clock in the morning, but wherever it is, Jeddah will find it for the east coast of Australia. But interesting. I think, I mean, obviously the McLaren pace wasn't there. Campy's the podiums were ridiculous, but maybe for Piastri. But, Leclerc in fourth, so I wasn't too far away, I guess. and K-Mag at HAAS. We'll talk about them too, but that was incredibly impressive.
Got it right.
I thought you were going to say something then, Freya, and then it feels like you just broke in half. This episode,
really well.
this episode is brought to you by NordVPN, of all people. Again, what a surprise! It is great to have NordVPN back sponsoring the podcast for another year, and they have a brand new offer for you as well. So you can get 2 years of top tier secure internet access, I should say, and all of the good things that NordVPN normally does. If you're only brand new to this podcast, I'm pretty sure most of the reason NordVPN come back to want to sponsor us is because most people listen, use the link, and they're like, wow, all these people are using the link. The reason? Because we all use it ourselves. Genuinely, I'm on it right now while I record this, which is probably why Campy is about 5,000 seconds behind. But there is a good deal for listeners in the US, UK, Australia, and Canada. With every purchase of a 2-year plan, you're in for a treat. There's some Uber Eats vouchers on offer. So we all know how expensive Uber Eats is at the best of times. So you might as well secure yourself and get something delicious for home as well, or for the office, wherever you get your Uber Eats delivered, like Campy to his olive green beanie factory. And don't forget, you can use NordVPN to stream all kinds of content and shows and sports and KO if you want to spend $35 a month, unless you want to go to an AFL team, apparently. And that membership is cheaper for the year, and then you get KO for free, which I've just learned, and now you have to. So pick an AFL team and sponsor them. And if you want to watch AFL, wherever you are around the world, including if you want to go for Melbourne and you live in the Cayman Islands, you can watch everything on KO via using NordVPN. Just go to nordvpn.com/Lakeside Drive. You can see all of the offer details there. You won't regret it, we promise you. And of course, 30-day money-back guarantee if you're not happy with it at all. Okay. It is time for team-by-team analysis, also for you both, because you can't hear it now. But I look forward to you both listening to this episode. Listener, you know what I'm about. I've subscribed to an AI voice app, and I have been having some fun. So you're enjoying that addition.
Jeez.
Technology.
This.
I love technology.
This is what happens when I get... I have chosen not to clone your voice, Campy. I thought you would be very mad at me if I cloned your voice with a computer. If someone else does it, though, please link me as to don't clone mine. You don't have my permission or Freya's permission. But let's go with team-by-team analysis. Let's start at the very back of the pack. We've already mentioned them. Alpine, Campy, let's start with you. An absolute disaster for them. As I mentioned earlier, and I only just found this out just before recording the F1 briefing, two significant people in Alpine have quit. Aero design, head of those two departments, is gone. So this whole new concept of car, if you're listening, Campy is just now giggling away.
Look, I don't mind Ryan Reynolds,
launch.
but what's your investment doing now, mate? You jumped on the wrong team, and I could have told you that. Anyway, look, I touched on it before. What could possibly go wrong? French team, 2 French drivers, staff that are disgruntled, not happy, all jump off the ship, quit way too early. We've heard this story before. Shame for them. Can't change the engine. The engine's clearly not the greatest, probably the worst engine on the grid.
Yeah.
So the only way that they can find the upgrades and speed on track is through the chassis and the designs, and clearly have not hit the marks over the last couple of years at all. Shame for that organisation. You think back to Renault, 05, 06, won some world championships. Their partnership with Red Bull sustained a lot of success back in that era, and for them to drop away in the last 7-8 years like they have, regardless, without not taking into consideration Danny Rick's couple of years there, which were good. Jacques Villeneuve, you dipshit. I'll get there soon.
Shut up, Jacques.
Yeah.
Yeah, shame for that organisation. Shame for the 2 drivers. What more do you want me to say? I said last week they will fall down the field. Next year we got the same engines, and the only changes they can make it to the chassis. Not going to improve, and they'll be looking 2027 with some new regs, very hopefully, but I'm not sure that they'll have any on-track data to suggest that they can jump up the pack where they really want or need to be in the future. So, bottom dwellers.
Well, those old flatheads. The good news is it's 2026, not 7, so they don't have to wait an extra year. don't they'll curse them for that, because they'll be like, "Oh, there's no point. There's no point setting up." Gasly qualified in 20th, finished in 18th. Ocon qualified 19th, finished in 17th. As I said at the top, the reason why they weren't dead last is because Sargent had issues and Bottas had his lengthy pit stop. So realistically, this has already become the HAAS of this year for this podcast, because we come to them at the very start of the team by team analysis and then say, I don't know what else to say about them.
Well, it's also quite hard to report on what they are saying about them, because I couldn't find a single post-race interview anywhere. They are acting like this race did not exist, and you can't really blame them for that. Look, I think the best thing that we can say about this team is, thank goodness, Piastri is not there anymore, neither is Daniel Ricciardo. So as much as sometimes we kind of look back and curse some decisions about when people leave certain teams or join others, we certainly were very anxious for Piastri this time last year, because let's not forget that in Bahrain and Saudi, that was looking like a dire move. Well, this is looking even more dire if he was still racing for them. So that's the only good thing we can really say about this team right now.
Let's move on to Sauber. I don't know if they're Steak or if they're Kick or if they're F1. They're just Sauber. There's still the Sauber logo on the car, so that's what I'm going to call them for this year, just like Minardi. Bottas had one of the best starts I've ever seen in Formula One. I'm not sure if you saw his onboard, but he rocketed. He qualified in 16th, and he was on the inside line coming into the first turn, and then unfortunately was part of the Stroll, Nico Hülkenberg debacle right in the first corner. But he had some confidence in that starting procedure, which was really, really good. As Freya, you've written here, had a nice test drive as a result. But, bang 57 more laps, race pace distance to see what they can do with the car. Because conversely, on Joe's side of the garage, Freya, he actually had a pretty decent showing. He was outside of the points, finishing in 11th, qualified in 17th. So that's a really good sort of progression up the grid. Clearly the setup for one lap pace is not there, but maybe race pace looking a little bit better. There was some distance, though, to 10th. But, Sauber, whatever they're called, can make it sort of work, I suppose, for next weekend.
Yeah, look, I think with Valtteri, look, in the situation that he was in, he did his best to avoid everything. You can also see that with his onboard of his, desperate effort to try and avoid everybody who was kind of colliding in front of him and trying to stay out of that mix, but wasn't to be. But it just shows how important it is to try and get that qualifying right and work on that one lap pace, so that they're not in that position of having to avoid chaos, and instead being in more of a controlling position further up the grid. It just shows the importance of your qualifying position, and your better chance of having a clean race there on in. For Joe, I think it was a very impressive recovery drive, and he seemed to be very happy with his position. Like he said, it was a pretty big jump up to points. But he said he didn't think he would be that high up and seems to be pretty stoked about his performance. Obviously, they didn't have much pace towards the end of that race, but they'd done pretty well right up until that point. And he said that they knew it was going to be a really close midfield battle, and they came out of that battle, perhaps better than they thought. But like I said, they just need to work on that one lap pace so that they don't end up in that position of having to fight as hard, or potentially get caught up in lap one incidents again.
Yeah, Campy, it is very, very close in this midfield pack. That is the one thing that is super clear from qualifying yesterday and also the race today. It is probably not where they want to be, or certainly not where Audi will want them to be. They'll want them to be sort of fighting well and truly in the points, not sort of 10, 12 seconds behind the points in 11th. But for an opening round, not the worst scenario for Sauber, considering how bad they were at the end of last year.
Yeah, look, I think on certain tracks, their qualifying pace or their one lap pace isn't going to help them out over the race distance. You just see the gaps and the natural time that you lose on those first 2 or 3 laps won't help them out in that midfield battle. Last night we saw an undercut that was really, really powerful, and they got that right. Hence why they were running out of tyres towards the end of the Grand Prix, and it helped show that they pitted 5 or 6 laps early and got ahead of everyone. You look at Ocon and what he did too, pitting early. he jumped in front of Danny Rick, who on track was, at the time when he pitted, was, 7 or 8 seconds in front of him. So if you get time to warm up those hard tyres, 5 or 6 laps before everybody else, it is a hell of a lot more beneficial. So they got that right. As for Bottas, geez, it's frustrating. I could see what he was trying to do. Unfortunately for him, I think he got the speeds right, and he could have carried that corner speed in his braking distance into the corner if no one was in front of him, but it's off a start. So not much you can do about that. Unfortunate. He did hit Hulk twice, it looked like. So, but he had to pit early too, and if it wasn't for that debacle of a 59-second pit stop at the end of the race, then maybe he could have shown a bit more potential, but his race was sort of over after turn 1, really.
One of the things also I've noted about this team is that the green is very specifically, it's chroma green, the green screen green. So there are already people on TikTok and Instagram rickrolling people of that video clip over the top of the Sauber. Very good. And also very good social media posts by the Sauber guys too. Harry Potter reference already. Going to Guan Yu Zhou and the Sauber team. Very good from them. Williams, brand new steering wheel, screen no longer fixed to the car. Doesn't work. Right.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
Sorry. It just makes me laugh, like in a really unfortunate way, but it is one of the most basic things that driver is going to need, which is a steering wheel that works. And when you looked at that onboard footage and it was just flashing up in front of him and he couldn't see what was happening in the changes that they were making, that's just a disaster. It means he's got no information, and basically that kind of reflected the rest of the car as well, though, which also didn't really seem to be working. I think he was quite lucky to qualify where he did when it comes to Albon, and he certainly said that they were a few spots higher than they thought they were going to be, but they just did not have the pace to hold on to those positions, not even close. I think they've got quite a bit of work ahead of them to even think about being part of the mid-back, to be entirely honest. We've come into this season with a lot of hope for Williams, but it wasn't reinforced for me watching this weekend.
Yeah, the steering wheel was the issue that caused Sargent to have to go off on track, and he needed a new steering wheel. And I had flashbacks to Oscar Piastri this time last year, Bahrain, new steering wheel. And then I thought about how long the McLaren logo loading screen took. It's like, how do I cancel this? Press X to continue. I'm trying. It still won't go. Anyway, they had to park the car up. But interesting that's an issue. I mean, obviously the first time that they're doing this under Ranger, a lot of the Mercedes power unit teams are really struggling with cooling the cars down, which I thought was really interesting. Albon not being able to change any settings on his steering wheel, Sargent having to replace his steering wheel. Basically, all round, no good, but certainly not the worst. Sargent was an issue, but Albon in 15th, probably not, as bad as they could have expected. Let's just move quickly on, though, because there's a lot to talk about with RB and Minardi, sorry. Campy, you are the owner of a Minardi trench coat, of course, one of the few in the country. Looking forward to you wearing that around the Australian Grand Prix in the 37-degree day with your beanie. Danny Rick. He qualified 14th, finished in 13th. Yuki Tsunoda qualified in 11th, finishing in 14th. But that 13th, 14th place, just reading that on the timesheet doesn't say the full story.
No, he had a few issues on that Q3 lap that he did. He generally had the pace over Yuki all weekend up until qualifying. Really, it's not to say that Yuki didn't perform really well. He did. Jeez, it was a frustrating race for Danny Rick. He got caught up in that Stroll, Hulkenberg, Bottas train and had to take some on lap 1. He had to take some actions to not crash into anyone, and he lost a spot. I think he lost 2 spots off the start, and then he gained one back because someone went off. I can't remember who at the start. So he sat in that 15th and 16th, and his race just developed. He was sort of in no man's land. They pitted him late. He lost 7 or 8 seconds to Ocon. Ocon got in front of him. What I was really impressed with Danny Rick was the back end of that race. Once he settled down into a race pace, clearly faster than his teammate, hence why the argument about letting him move past him later on in the swapping positions later on in the Grand Prix. I get it why Tsunoda was so frustrated by it. He said he didn't like it, but the reality was Danny Rick, they were on different tyre compounds, and there was a chance to try and jump up and get Magnussen. It didn't eventuate in the end, but there was a genuine chance of it. So a good decision by the team. Points were never really on offer, but just goes to show how tight qualifying is this year. You have to get qualifying right, because if you don't, even if you're 2 or 3 positions behind your teammate or you're not in that 11th, 12th place, then your race will suffer the consequences of that, and we saw that play out for Danny Rick last night. Had he been up with Yuki Tsunoda in that, 8 or 9 seconds up the road, it might have been a very different story for him. Probably still not in the points, but just as the race progressed, and he needs to get that right. He's a professional, and he'll do it. I thought Yuki drove pretty well, considering all weekend too. So, yeah.
Yeah, the team left it too late to swap drivers, a lap too late. Danny Rick said press conference afterwards or in the media pen that he was aware of Tsunoda being Tsunoda. In fact, my favourite quote from Danny Rick this weekend on the radio was "What a fucking helmet," in reference to Tsunoda. You don't often hear DR swear on the radio, so you can tell that he was probably like, "Wow, okay." And Freya, it's not the best start for Laurent Mecchi. He's the brand new team principal coming from Ferrari to, I was going to say AlphaTauri to Minardi for this year, already having an issue that he's going to have to sort out with both of his drivers.
Well, the bit which kind of made me probably change my opinion on what went on here a little bit, it was in the post-race interview where Daniel said he was obviously frustrated with the team orders call, and I understand that, but we discussed this possibility before the race. He knew that I was going to be on fresh softs at the end of the race. He knew I was there. He knew he wasn't handing me points because neither of us were likely to finish in the points. And if we'd gone earlier, we would have had a much better chance. The softs in particular, as you said, Campy, every minute counts. They can fall away so quickly. So if they made that team order and then Yuki took 3 laps to put it into place, and then they actually said, no, move over. By that time, he's got Max breathing down his neck, so he had to move over him. That disrupts your flow of the race, and his tyres have completely fallen away. So I completely understand why Yuki felt the way he did. On the surface of it, super frustrating. And let's remember, we've also watched Daniel let go for other people as well when they are in with a better chance 1,000,000 times over. And he goes, and they say, let Lando through, and you say copy. And then they talk about it afterwards. You don't lunge down after the race, after the flag is gone at your teammate. So I think knowing that they had listed this as a possibility, given the different strategies that they were on, that's something that makes me say, not only did you, behave quite immaturely and dangerously in this situation, you actually knew this was coming and had time to talk about it with the team both before and afterwards. Like you said, James, Mecchi is going to have to deal with this really head on because, this is the first race of the season. You can't let this kind of fester and let it lead to further on-track and off-track animosity, because whilst this is not Daniel's problem to solve, when you have a temperament like Yuki's, as someone who is in a team that you are leading, it is your responsibility to help him to manage that and act accordingly. And there's got to be consequences as well, quite frankly. Like, I don't want to sound, you're all high and mighty in terms of how we should all be behaving, or, I get it. Emotions run so high in these situations, but it's the same for everybody. Every single person who's competing is in the same high adrenaline, high emotion, competitive environment, and it is up to you what type of athlete you want to be. And I'm not sure that the way he behaved today is the best version of Yuki that Yuki can be. And I think it's a shame as well, right? Because we both looked at these drivers and go, wow, Yuki's been great in terms of thinking about how much you could learn from from Ricardo. They seem to have a great dynamic, and this is kind of the type of thing that can really fracture that type of team dynamic. So they're going to have to really nip it in the bud.
Yeah, listener, if you didn't watch, this was off the broadcast. So flag is gone. It's a cool down lap. It's turn 8, the hairpin. Yuki lets DR past because Yuki got ahead of him after the checkered flag. DR goes through, and then Yuki comes roaring up the inside, unnecessarily almost colliding with him. And the checkered flag's already gone. So it's a cool down lap, guys. Relax. It was just totally unnecessary behavior. And of course, okay, after the broadcast, but then everyone starts sharing that video all over the place. Anyway, it's they'll be hoping to sort that shit out, basically, because they need to see how this car performs come this race weekend in Jeddah. And it's very clearly not a copy of the RB19. If everyone was thinking that, including us to a point, especially Campy with his predictions, it's a shame because it's not.
Wishful thinking, Jim.
Haas, though, a completely different set of circumstances this year, and it's Gunther is still to thank for this because Ayo Komatsu has not been in the team long enough to have sorted these issues out. But the massive issue that they had in 2023 was that they kept eating their rear tyres, and as soon as they hit the cliff, they fell off massively. They would lose positions very, very quickly, and genuinely in a place where they couldn't really pit to make any sort of difference. That, Campy, seems to have sorted itself out because K-Mag didn't have as good a qualifying as Hülkenberg. Hülkenberg got all the way to Q3, which was stunning, saved himself a set of softs to use those in the race before, of course, the contact with Stroll, which really buggered it for him. But there's big brain thinking there. As Ted Kravitz said, is MVP from qualifying. And the way that the car was able to hold position and attack and defend was incredibly significantly different from last year.
We've seen the gains on the Ferrari and when it comes to rear suspension and the tyre degradation on those cars. You know, you look at them and Ferrari's a different team this year when it comes to tyre degradation. Haas is exactly the same. And geez, mate, Hulk can pull a lap out of his backside when he needs to consistently. I think it was 4 or 5 times he made Q1 last year and first race this year to do that. Excellent. Unfortunately, his race was probably ruined first lap, but we saw K-Mag make some jumps up the grid too. So a bit of that strategy, pitting 2 or 3 laps before everybody else, getting undercuts, but he put himself in the right position, and that's what we want to see from his team. If Hulk can convert one of those starts to picking up to those 2 or 3 positions that he's traditionally lost when he's had those good starts, fighting for 7 or 8 laps with the front lovers, and then they'll naturally drive up the road and he will fall back. That'll hold himself in really good stead to get some points. And I think they'll probably do 4 or 5 races this year where they'll, get some consistent, 8th, 9th, 10th points, just depending on the circumstances on the track. That's what they're relying on. They're not in the points fight every weekend, but they're really relying on the chaos which can happen in Formula One, which jumbles up the grid orders, etc. So yeah, it's exciting for them. It's good. I think we need to fully congratulate Steiner on what he did before he was sacked from the team, and hopefully Gene Haas recognises that and says good. It's good to see him on the grid too.
Yeah, I don't think Gene will recognise it. He didn't even see Gunther or anything, but Gunther didn't even realise he was supposed to be there. Freya, he was there though. Almost, he's like, well, I wasn't supposed to be here, but now I'm here. And they're like, Sky flying, like going, oh, what's your pick for the weekend? Max, it's like he hasn't changed at all. He's just very much to the fact. Here's a fact. There's no embellishment. We're not talking forever like the three of us do about a point. Here's the point, because I've got other shit to do.
High value, such quality, and it's in such a short amount of time as well. Been there for 3.5 seconds, and he's told us everything we need to know. Look, there was two things that I took from their conversation with Steiner. Three things. First was that he did seem like he had a big grin on his face. He said, I just came into this weekend feeling so light. There's none of this, like, I've got 1,000 things to do before 8 o'clock in the morning. Got to go see the FAA about this and go see that team about that and check in with this driver. He's like, I just came in and I'll see what the weekend throws at me. I was like, sometimes it felt like that's what you were doing when you were team principals. So good to see that.
Disrespect.
Good to see that he is feeling lighter in the shoulders, which is nice. But the other thing I was going to say was his perspective on Toto and the Mercedes seat. So he basically made the points around what he would be looking for. He said, look, if that's me, you're wanting someone who is really consistent and has already shown you really solid pace. And I know that sounds really obvious, but I think when you're up fighting for those podium positions as Mercedes want to be, probably much like how he felt, they're perhaps not ready to bring in an unknown quantity in terms of potentially jeopardizing the potential that they might have up the front and battling for podiums. So I would say that they're potentially not ready to bring in somebody who's new and unfamiliar when they're still figuring out what's going on with their design. They'll be transitioning George to being in more of a leadership role within the team, that type of thing. The other thing was that he was saying was making the point that no one will move until they move, which I thought was interesting. He said, Toto is actually in a really great position here. He has the control over the driver market, basically. No one's going to move until he does. So he will have the pick of the lot, so to speak. And to your point about Nico Campy just kind of saying he can just pull a lap out. He was really reinforcing that message. He's like, look, Nico's career, he's just been in the wrong place at the wrong time. And that's not necessarily his fault. Sometimes you make decisions and things don't play out the way you think they're going to. And it really was evident how much, this is kind of the third thing, it was really evident how much he valued his experience and what he brought to the team, and basically said his contribution to HAAS is invaluable, which I thought was, pretty insightful, So keep giving us absolute gold like that, Steiner. We love seeing you around.
All right, something a little bit different for the podcast. If you're interested in books and you're interested in Oscar Piastri, you will want to listen to this. And details of this competition can be found in the link description. Sorry, in the show description, I should say. There's a link. Also, check out Instagram. But it's going to be good. I've good authority. The book is worth reading. We'll take another short ad break. We'll be back in just a moment. Okay, let's continue. Green Machine time. Thomas J. Camp, Aston Martin arrived here last year with two drivers, or one driver and one driver with broken wrists. And Alonso, of course, got onto the podium. It was a massive shock. Everyone was surprised that Aston Martin made massive gains. He did say out of testing that the car felt like it had more performance. Just clearly everyone else has found some more performance too compared to this time last year. So for Alonso, qualified in 6th, finished in 9th in the points. Didn't really have a great showing. Was very much under pressure by the McLarens multiple times, depending on pit stop strategies. And Stroll qualified in 12th, but finished in 10th. So not a great day for Aston Martin, but is it a bad day when both cars finish in points?
Not a bad day, but it's not the day that they wanted or hoped for. I think this team, look, if you can draw anything from this race, Aston Martin is in no man's land comparative to the rest of the grid. You've got the four teams that are clearly quicker than them on track. We saw that over a race distance, how Alonso just didn't have the pace to keep up with the likes of the McLarens, the Mercedes, the Ferraris and the Red Bulls. But they were clearly better than everybody else on the grid. And, if you start up front like Fernando Alonso, he's going to drop backwards. But if you start behind in that, 12th to 16th type thing, they've got the pace to pass cars and be in that 9th, 10th. Unfortunately for them, I think that's where we see them, before that they bring upgrades to the car and, get some on track improvement. That's where we're going to see them 9th and 10th, the 5th best grid on the car at the moment. And I'm not sure they jump up. I think that gap to the teams in front of them is too big. But we did see what McLaren did last year, and be interesting to see how it goes. Fernando, he's weighing up whether he drives on again. He said we talked about new regs in 2026 and whether he's got an appetite for it. But it's the first time we've heard Fernando Alonso talk about his future in a really open and transparent way. I think he was hoping that he would have a car that he would be on the podium again, and he'll reassess it in 2 or 3 races about what his future looks like. I want him on the grid because I think it's easier to keep a Fernando Alonso on the grid than kick him off, and I think he's better for the sport, and we all want to see him do well. Unfortunately, it's just we got flashes of it for 7 or 8 races last year when the car was really good, but I just don't think Aston as an organisation have made that jump like the other teams in front of them have, which is unfortunate. So I think that's where we'll see them for the rest of the year.
Let's be very clear. Pedro de la Rosa is in Toto Wolff's favourites list, or the other way around. Toto Wolff is in his favourites list because he'll be calling Toto, trying to get Mercedes to take Fernando Alonso as their driver for next year. And if Antonelli doesn't prove to be an F2 champion, and by the way, the F2 looking so far this year,
what's with those rear wings?
No one can really understand the cars yet.
Disgusting.
Yeah, anyway, we'll talk about F2 at another time when there's not a lot else to talk about. But if that's the thing, then Fernando Alonso is the obvious choice because he has real-world vision and experience of coming into a team where the car is looking pretty good and being able to extract the most out of it. Freya, much more to add to Aston Martin?
No, except to say that the hero of the day really was Alonso's, the mechanic who released him after his pit stop and managed to avoid him driving straight into the side of the Williams that had come in directly in front of him. So kudos claps to the mechanic who managed to avoid what was he just did his job exceptionally well. And yeah, very happy to see that not transpire.
Let's talk about Papayas. Lando Norris qualified 7th, finished in 6th, Piastri 8th and 8th. Piastri looked good through practice. He then lamented his speed through qualifying, said he felt a bit messy. He didn't really feel that comfortable with the car as well with the race, reiterating the fact that Bahrain is a circuit that doesn't suit the McLaren, apparently. It's a high degradation circuit too. The tarmac is incredibly rough here compared to elsewhere where we go on this calendar. Campy, both of these drivers, I mean, again, talking about sort of no man's land, there is a pretty significant gap, I feel, between sort of where Red Bull is to Ferrari, really-ish Mercedes, then McLaren / Aston Martin, and then everybody else, kind of Williams, RB, HAAS, everyone else sort of fighting in that area. But you mentioned it just before. It's the only team to really have done a full turnaround in terms of upgrades and pace from the beginning of the year to sort of Austria or the British Grand Prix. Do you think that this is a team that's able to continue down that trajectory, or do you think they've plateaued now to a point where everyone else is caught up in the same kind of way?
Look, throughout testing and pre-season, McLaren have been really coy about their on-track performance, and they know the car was better than it was this time last year. And Zach Brown's saying the same thing he did last year. Look, we got some upgrades in the second half of the season. That's where we need to be to win some races and be really competitive. Now, last year when he was saying that, I thought that is the biggest load of bullshit I've ever heard. We've never seen the gains that McLaren made on track from the start of the season to the end of the season last year. So moving forward, I hope they get those performance and the upgrades right so that they can compete up the front. Whether they beat a Red Bull, I'm not too sure, but it's only good for Lando and Oscar to have a faster car on track. So, look, I think they were pretty comparable with the Mercedes. You're just looking at qualifying times, really. I thought Oscar was unlucky to lose that position to Hamilton. That's a strategy call from McLaren. They probably pitted him one lap too late. I mean, he made that move after his second pit stop up the inside at turn 1, and then Hamilton got past him and he really couldn't do it. What I liked from Oscar was that he didn't lose. He only lost, 6 seconds over race distance to his teammate. 4 of those 4 seconds of that happened in pit stops. So I was impressed with his race pace. Just needs to get better on that one lap pace and he'll be fine. Interestingly, there's a comment made last night about, I think Karun made it in practice, about if you take from Spa onwards last year, the 15 qualifyings, including the sprint races, it was actually 8-7 Oscar's way, that back end. So we know he's lightning quick around in qualifying over one lap. So I would hope to see that he just performs a bit better, but they're allowed to have an off weekend on the first weekend of the year. But come race 5 or 6, I want to be seeing Oscar just dominating Lando, which I think he eventually will.
Freya, he said to Sky F1 that he specifically mentioned Australia, Suzuka, those faster style tracks where the car will likely suit those sort of medium to faster corners. That he feels like there's probably more confidence there. But still got Jeddah to go in between, which is, as Max Verstappen said, kind of like Montreal, almost a street circuit, quote unquote, which is interesting. But really, the Papaya team is in a much better position than when they were last year. It is night and day in terms of difference.
Yeah, and you kind of think about them in comparison to Aston Martin, and they had a bit of an inverse, I suppose, progression last year, and now we're kind of seeing maybe even the opposite this year. So it will be interesting to see if they can continue to step up. And look, I think this weekend they did the best with what they had, to be entirely honest. Both of the drivers say they didn't feel very comfortable in the car. The funniest thing was actually both of them talking about that last corner. And Norris said, how'd that last corner feel for you, Oscar? And he was like, yeah, I wish it didn't exist. And you won't hear it too often, but in a positive note for Lando Norris, was actually quite defensive of Oscar's driving, and that he said, look, Oscar was not on a good strategy today and he had to drive defensively. He was trying to protect himself from the undercut, and that's just not a position you ever really want to be in as a driver or as a team. And he navigated that pretty well. And like you said, Campy, Oscar was great in terms of not backing off from a fight. He said, look, the likelihood was low of me coming out on top of Lewis, but you've got to be in the fight in order to see what you can do with it. So I think they did the best with what they had. I think it's just the start for them, and hopefully we see that they are just on a much higher platform in comparison to where they were at the start of last year, and they don't have the I suppose, progressive direction that Aston Martin took, and it does, in fact, just keep getting better for them.
Let's look at Mercedes. Russell qualified third, finished in fifth. Hamilton qualified in ninth and finished in seventh. This car was not working in a number of different ways. The hard compound tyre was unable to sort of activate properly for them. They lost a lot of performance. Overheating issues going on. Lewis reported that his seat was broken, or it felt like his seat was broken. Toto not totally stoked with how everything sort of fleshed out, added to the list. Discord. I've been up. Oh my God, been up a very long time. But Toto said they're losing 4 to 6 tenths because of those cooling issues per lap. So I think from their point of view, they sort of said after the race that they're pretty sure they can fix those cooling issues ahead of next weekend. So that's good news for them. But Hamilton just seems, Freya, I don't know if you're sort of picking up on this, but he just seems to just be disengaging ever so slightly. He was just taking one step back. He's 24 steps to take back until he's in red. He's taken the first one back. Do you think at some point in the year, though, he'll regret that decision change when Mercedes inevitably jump Ferrari because Ferrari have poor strategy?
I don't know. I don't think he'll regret it. I think what was interesting this weekend was that he kind of talked about himself more than he did the team, which is pretty unusual for him. When they said, like, how are you feeling? He was like, personally, I feel great. My training is obviously working because I feel fantastic. I was like, I'm not sure that's what she meant, actually, in terms of how you're feeling. I think she might have been talking about your race and how the car felt. No, look, Hamilton's a professional. I think he will give it everything he's got this year. He might not necessarily have the kind of emotional connection to the results in the way that he has in previous years, or feel the same level of frustration because he knows that he's out. So you kind of get that almost, commitment to the drive, but a bit of a carefree attitude in that he's not going to, I would say, ruminate on whether or not they make the same level of progress this year in comparison to last year, or have they solved all of their problems. I don't think he's going to get stuck on those questions in the same way that he would in previous years. But I wouldn't question what he's going to take to the team. Like, he's a professional and this is his life. It's all consuming for him, and I don't think that would be good for his reputation either. So, and as much as his seat is basically confirmed now at Ferrari for as long as he wants to keep driving in Formula One, he's still a professional reputation to go with all of his stuff. And so I think he'll care less, but still give it everything he has, and maybe just spend some more time on things that are important to him outside of the team, which he might not have done in previous years.
It seems like this design redirection, which is very Red Bull-esque, Campy, is the direction that is right for Mercedes. They couldn't make their design philosophy work. Only Adrian Newey apparently can do that. So potentially they're able to get up there into the mix. I mean, Russell did have a good qualifying session.
He did. When Lewis put it on the front row in Q2, I thought, in practice 2, I thought, geez, maybe this Mercedes has a bit more to it than what we first thought. And it just never really, just from my perspective, it was a weekend that sort of failed to launch for them. They promised a lot. They didn't deliver. And they were probably a bit frustrated with it. They probably thought they had more than they did when they showed up. Anyway, look, they made some good passes. They dropped back to Russell. Yeah, look, it's frustrating for them. They want to be competing with Max Verstappen and Red Bull up the front, and the reality is, on last night's result, it doesn't look like it's going to happen. They'll have some races where they're, the second best car, but that'll be track specific for them this year. And as for Hamilton, I'm not sure he's checked out yet, but I think after 7 or 8 races in the same position they were in last night, if that continues, he'll check out pretty quickly, and you'll get the Lewis Hamilton blasé attitude that we've seen at times throughout his career, and it's a bit destructive. And just because of who he is and the results and his standing in this sport, the media will hype up these little things, and words will be taken out of context and will create bigger stories. So anyway.
Well, let's talk about Ferrari. Ferrari's Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz is Carlos Sainz, because at this point, Carlos is no longer in the team. He's merely driving the Ferrari, and he's Team Carlos. And you know what? Good for you, bud. That is exactly what you should be doing. We are all here for it. He was the fastest of the Ferraris anyway through practice, so it makes sense that we had 1-2 Red Bull, and then the third, the next best car being Carlos Sainz's Ferrari. He should be happy with that. Honestly, it didn't have as good a qualifying as Leclerc. Leclerc was on it and had a really shit strategy call with Ferrari. For some reason, pulled him in for a fresh set of softs in Q1 because they didn't think he was going to make it into Q2. He would have done. And then had to start Q3 on an old set of scrubbed softs before then setting time. Anyway, it's a classic Ferrari already. We haven't even got out of where we've been testing the thing. Campy, there is hope, though, that we could probably see maybe in qualifying, maybe in Saturday, if Charles or if Carlos can put it together, that they can genuinely rival Max, at least early on, until Red Bull inevitably walk off again. There was sort of discussed that they lost some one-lap pace for race pace, but it also didn't sort of flesh out that way either. Not that we could really see with Charles whether or not
they beat a Red Bull and then lost out to one Red Bull in qualifying, so that was pretty consistent with what happened last year. So I still think they've got that one-lap pace. They've just sorted out the tyre deck. As for Carlos, geez, he drove exceptionally against his teammate last night. I don't think Carlos would have made those moves and been as aggressive with Charles this time last year or in the previous couple of years he's driven for them. So I was really impressed with Carlos's drive last night, albeit not the car he wanted, but he got that third spot, so that's excellent for him. But, geez, Charles just struggled on those tyres. From lap 2, he was locking up consistently. The car was oversteer. You could see the back end stepping out. Whereas Carlos's car was planted through those corners, and it looked really, the stability through the corner looked good. And even the steering inputs that we saw glimpses of just looked like the car was handling better. Now, I don't know whether that's a setup issue and whether Charles Leclerc, the way he set up the car, enabled him to, get that one lap pace and beat his teammate by a couple of tenths in qualifying. But then when you come to a race, it made him struggle. I don't know what the car setup's like and where they differed, but I would suggest that's probably where it was. So Carlos may be playing the long game and the racing game, but he clearly had some pace. And I think Perez is beatable in that Red Bull. So they can, get on that second step of the podium, and something will inevitably happen to Max this year on track. So therefore, there's a win up for grabs, and if they're, right time, right place, they could get a win again. But yeah, I was stoked with Carlos's drive last night. I thought it was a bit of a statement drive, and it'd be if he continues to do that all year, I think it'll be Ferrari may look like a bit of egg on their face by the end of the year, because of the way, that they chose to handle the drivers for next season.
And no different to every other season where they continue to stuff up strategy. I mean, come on. Leclerc had issues. He had, at one point, I think the left brake was 100 degrees hotter than his right front brake. So you can't drive a car like that. As he said, he kept locking up because of braking overheating issues. It was dangerous, Freya. You felt for him because Bahrain is traditionally the circuit that he has some kind of technical issue, and within maybe view of the podium and one either first or second, something happens and he ends up bloody fourth or out altogether.
Yeah, like you've got to feel for him. I think coming out of last season, which just seemed to have, bad luck after bad luck after bad luck. I'm like, where are you getting this juju from, Leclerc? It's just
Bottas
destroying his luck along with Bottas. But like you said, like race one of the season, that is just not what he wants to see. In comparison to, for like the Mercedes, for example, where they both were experiencing such similar issues when it comes to the tyre cooling and various other issues. They were very similar on both cars. These looked like two different cars in the way that they were handling and the issues that they were seeing. But I think what's important when it comes to Carlos Sainz, like we saw last year, is that when those opportunities are there, he is there. And that's going to be the most important thing for him, as he did with his win last year. When something goes wrong with the car in front, you've got to be right there behind him. When I say him, obviously I mean Max and on occasion Checo, because I agree, Campy, I think Checo is beatable in the Red Bull. If Ferrari managed to get their strategy right and if the car is reliable, So I think it's pretty hard to judge Leclerc on this weekend. And I think he will just be getting very worried for the season ahead and all the various other issues that he might be concerned about occurring.
Yeah, like being the second driver when Hamilton comes in. Let's wrap this team-by-team analysis up with Red Bull. Verstappen, clean sweep. Congratulations on the championship, Max. You've had a great year already. Perez, 22 odd seconds behind after racing distance. Just the gap is way too big already. Helmut Marko now has his hands full with, he managed to do a 1-2, but he's significantly far behind. And Yuki Tsunoda acting the way that he did. We know what Red Bull's like, and they don't stuff around with decisions like this. And I'm not necessarily saying that Danny Rick ends up going to that seat. I think if that's the performance, even with 1 and 2s, the pressure will start mounting on Perez to be closer, both in qualifying, because he qualified 5th and finished in 2nd, and Verstappen first, like, hello. But of course, the big thing is this cloud hanging over Red Bull with Horner and the allegations that were dismissed by Red Bull GmbH, which was the parent company of Red Bull Racing, and Zach Brown and Toto Wolff cannot bloody help themselves in the team principal press conference going, we need greater visibility and what's going on. It's like, you could have picked who would have chased them in the same way that Horner would have chased either one of them if it was in the same way around. These three just bloody can't help themselves. But it is a dark cloud. Interestingly, a lot of the shareholders were there from Red Bull to show support, except for the Austrian-led contingent. So anyway, interesting to see what comes of that. There's no point speculating here. There's a Google Drive file floating around. It's in our Discord. Just caution with one of them. I've sent it to you also really? In our group chat.
Not reading Rob it.
To quote Rob James, do not scroll backwards from the last photo because you'll get a whole thing. Anyway, is it real? Is it not? Well, 117 journalists, F1 senior people were sent this Dropbox file, Google Drive file by someone. Anyway, it's just a very messy situation, which is a shame, Frey, because really everyone should be focusing on the design magnificence of this iteration of the RB20, or Red Bull, I should say, the RB20. The heart of the RB19, but still absolutely just crushing it.
The way Horner described this car and how the team works was basically saying it still has the kind of DNA remnants of the RB19, but our design team never settles. We could have left that car where it was and look at a few different aero upgrades and probably still have been the most competitive car on the grid, but that's not how our team works. We're constantly looking for what we can do better, and if that means completely revolutionizing our design based on an idea that we have from what we saw in the early Mercedes car. Like, there was something there. We just had to figure out how it worked, which we then did. And I think that's really interesting to see how their team is functioning. Like you said, they had two choices at the start of this season, just to make a variation on last year's with a few technical adjustments to see if they can extract any further pace from the design that they already had, which they knew worked superbly, or to basically start again, but still using some of their fundamentals from what was an exceptional car. So that to me does say a lot about kind of the values, I suppose, of the design team at the very least, if not the broader organisation, but how that specific group of individuals work, and perhaps it extends that beyond that. I don't know. He also said he was talking about strategy and that type of thing. He was very surprised that nobody else, with the exception of basically, well, not nobody else because Daniel Ricciardo did, but many didn't take an extra set of softs into the race. He was like, that just seemed, when we knew what we'd seen so far, and the difficulty of getting temperatures up and everything else, didn't make sense not to have that up your sleeve. So he was quite surprised that nobody else did that. And basically said that if Checo keeps performing like he did today, he'll keep his seat. He's like, we keep getting 1-2 finishes. That's what he's got to do. I think the gap question is an interesting one because, like you said, does it matter that he finishes 20 seconds behind his teammate if he's always behind his teammate? I think the qualifying performance is a bigger issue rather than kind of, the end of the race gap, because as Toto Wolff said, Max is in a different galaxy to every single other driver on the grid. So, do they see that the same way and just go, get your qualifying right, get your second position, we don't care what the gap is to Max, potentially, and be a team player when we need you to be. That's what he's got to do. So to keep his seat, I don't see him keeping it for next year, but it would be pretty hard for him if he delivers the way he did this weekend.
All right, let's finish with drivers of the day. Freya, who is your driver of the day?
Carlos.
Campy? Yeah, okay, I agree. It's hard to think of anyone else. I think everyone did okay, but Carlos is just in an absolute league of his own. Well, Max as well, but that doesn't count. You can't have him as driver of the day. What's wrong with you? All right, let's look at our fantasy team name competition. It is starting yet again for another year. You can join via our website. You can join via many things. It's just search for it in the thing. I don't know. Anyway, this website is terrible, by the way. There's another app that sponsors the other podcast that I do, and it is a million times better and actually enjoyable to use. That's not a bad. I just was like, oh my God, this is how it works. So I found some names. So did you, Freya? I think the first 5 or 6 are yours. Would you like to read them out, the ones that you found?
The first one, I just love it for its simplicity and my complete and utter agreement with the statement, which is Danny Rick for life. Thank you, Becky. You're not wrong. My heart will Grosjean, Nikita. Excellent work. Daniel Ricciardo, Sinead. Excellent work. Amex Venmo Minardi. Here for that. Absolutely. And then, of course, Toro Bosso RB Minardi. Again, we're all in on the Minardi here.
Yes,
and
good.
I think the last one for me was cash only RB Ash.
Robbo, no
excellent
cash.
Contribution.
Cash.
I found What's the Racing Point? John, Alpine Tractors for Snails, Alex, Ferrari and Drain Covers, Fight, Hillary. How'd you take your steak? Haley, Da Vinci's Mona Visa Cash App, Kieran, Sergeant at Harms, Michael, that's very good. Avocado Pastry, Tina, Toro Bosso's Only Fangios, the name for that's
nice.
Dash. Don't forget the hyphen, Nicholas. Yes, thank you very much. I ended up in 25th, Freya ended up in 36th, and I don't think Campy's even joined the league yet. Have you?
I will do it this week.
Oh, unbelievable. There's always one of either of you each year forgets to do it. I look forward to you forgetting next year, Freya.
I was top 1,000 in the
first,
world last
though,
year.
James' son.
That's good enough for me. I'm like Nico Rosberg.
You've got to be in it
I'm
to
like Nico
maintain that,
Rosberg.
though,
Win something or do well, then
Here we go.
retire and start a shitty podcast and YouTube channel and good to go.
And not wearing
Have you
shoes.
also bought some sandals?
Well, you should see the loafers I'm rocking at the moment.
No.
No, thank you.
No, thank you.
Slippers.
First was James' son, Cookie, Jamison C. Second, What's the Racing Point, John S. And third, How Many Blue Cars, Mike H. There's still time. I mean, there's so many races this year, you could probably make a comeback from that. So Campy, remind yourself to do that. Up next is Saudi Arabia this coming week. Very, very exciting. Let's have some quick predictions before we go. Freya, who is your podium?
My podium is Verstappen, Carlos, and then Perez.
Okay. And
in 10th, we've got Yuki Tsunoda. That's if he doesn't throw a tantrum and with the force of that tantrum propel himself to the back of the grid. Last, I'm going to go K-Mag. And then my bold prediction is that there is going to be at least 3 retirements, because last year we had Stroll who retired and then we sort of got that restart. Albon's brake failed and so he retired as well. So I think there's going to be at least 3.
You're wishing for red flags.
Well,
you are disrespecting the East Coast of Australia, delaying our watching.
No, I'm saying it's going to be retirements. They do not always equal red flags. Like Albon retired. Well, Albon retired without a restart last year, I think. So, that's my bold prediction. Only 17 are finishing. 16.
Ridiculous.
17.
4 o'clock in the morning. That's what time the race is on. Oh, Campy.
Max,
who's your
Checo, and Carlos.
Okay.
10th will be also Checo, because I want him to crash out. I want that continuation from last year.
It's just ridiculous.
It doesn't work.
I don't think.
This is you're discrediting yourself without on purpose.
Last will be Albon. I'm going to go Gasly, actually.
Don't agree with
Gasly
that.
last place.
Of course it is. If you're not saying an Alpine for last, it's like you're not watching Formula One at the moment. Yep, okay.
3 red flags next weekend and some big crashes.
Oh, why? Why are you doing this?
There is literally
What's
nothing
wrong with
original
you?
about any of your predictions. By the way,
Unbelievable.
Campy.
You've turned into Tommy T. My podium,
Mate,
Max,
get a fucking haircut, Jim.
will be
Jesus.
Max. I did. Actually, I did. It's no longer anywhere near as long. Hey, I've been working 8 hours already today for Formula One. How dare you? My thing, it'll be Max, it'll be Carlos, and then Hamilton, because the Mercedes are actually quick around here. Last year they were 4th and 5th, so hopefully with a better sort of design package and sorting cooling out, I think they'll be fast. 10th will be, I think K-Mag will end up in the points. Last will be Ocon. Bold prediction is that we'll see only one of each of the manufacturers in the points.
I like it.
So that's bold. It's not going to happen because Checo will be in there somewhere. Anyway, that's it for this episode of Lakeside Drive. Thank you so much for listening and for being part of the show. A massive thank you if you started watching us on YouTube, if you've left a comment. Thank you for messaging the Instagram page. Thank you for being part of the Discord channel. It has been bloody fantastic to welcome so many new people. We love doing this, even though this is a bit of a lengthy one to be the first one of the year. We promise it'll be slightly more concise as the days and months go on, when Max has already won the championship already. But don't forget that you can join our Discord server, be part of the conversation, join our fantasy league, subscribe to us on YouTube and on any podcast app of your choice. That's it for this episode. See you only in a couple of days' time as we review the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix.